Hi everybody, in this video we're going to do an introduction to propositional statements. We should start with the definition. A propositional statement is a sentence that is either true, like July is in the summer, or false, like December is in the spring. It's important to remember that not all sentences are propositional statements, like shut the door, are you cold, or have a seat. Things that are commands and questions don't have a truth value, so they can't be a propositional statement. Because statements can be long, we use letters like P, Q, and R to represent our logical or propositional statements. Using logical connectives allows us to combine simple statements into more complex ones. This will help us model real decision-making situations more accurately. For example, what if P is you have a fever? The opposite of that would be you do not have a fever, which we write as not P. Remember, only one of these can be true at the same time. Anytime we're working with negations, the statement and its negation must have opposite truth values. We can make that a little bit bigger by adding in a second statement. So let's try Q is you have a sore throat. Then we can combine P and Q by saying you have a fever and you have a sore throat. Introducing the word and is called a conjunction. And as a symbol, we use something that looks like an inverted V, which means we can simply write this whole statement as P and Q. If we switch our connective to or, meaning we have you have a fever or you have a sore throat, we will call this sentence a disjunction. So I want you to think conjunction is and, disjunction is or. The symbol we use for or looks like a V. That means we would write the sentence you have a fever or you have a sore throat as P or Q. Let's add in a third statement R that represents you have an infection. Then we could write, if you have an infection, then you have a fever. This connective is composed of two words, both if and then. We call this a conditional, and we write it with an arrow. We would write R with an arrow to P. We read this as R implies P. When you're working with conditionals, it's important to look at where the word if occurs. Let's take a look at the statement, you don't have an infection if you don't have a sore throat. We can see the first statement represents not R. The second statement represents not Q. But it's important to stop and notice that the if comes in the middle. That says if we write this in symbolic form, we want to start with the not Q. We would say not Q implies not R. When you're working with conditionals, it's important to always start where the if begins. Our last connective is called the biconditional. It stands for P implies Q and Q implies P. We write it with a double arrow and we say it as if and only if. So P with a double arrow Q says P if and only if Q. That might look like a person has a fever if and only if their body temperature is above 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's practice working with our symbols. We're going to let P be the statement you have good credit. Q is you receive a low interest rate, and R is you can buy a new car. The first thing we're going to write out is P and Q. That means you have good credit and you can buy a new car. Our next statement is P with an arrow over to Q and R. So we're starting with P, which is good credit. Because there's an arrow, we know we're going to say if you have good credit. After that, we're going to combine Q and R. Remember, we call this a conjunction because it's and, so we're going to say both of the statements with and between it. That means we have, if you have good credit, then you receive a low interest rate and you can buy a new car. Let's try a disjunction. We have P or not Q. P is you have good credit, Q is you get a low interest rate, but remember, we're throwing in a negation. We have you have good credit or you do not receive a low interest rate. Our last one is Q with the double arrow to R. The double arrow is biconditional, which we say is if and only if. Here we say you receive a low interest rate if and only if you can buy a new car.